Imagine losing everyone you love because of a lie. A lie so cruel it ruined your name, your job, and your peace until one DNA test flipped everything. Wait, wrong story. Let me start over. Imagine losing your entire family's future because of a trusted relative's greed. When I was 17, my uncle Mark was the kind of man the whole town put on a pedestal. Church-going, generous, always the perfect family man who spoke about community values. But what no one knew was that he was systematically stealing from every single person who trusted him. And my Aunt Linda, she wasn't just in the dark. She was actively helping him cover up the fraud. I grew up in a small, tight-knit town in Central Texas where everyone knew everyone's business and trust was the only currency that mattered. My parents weren't rich, not by a long shot, but they were the definition of hardworking. My uncle, Mark Bennett, was my dad's older brother. Confident, charming, always the life of the party, always throwing those huge theatrical summer barbecues. He ran what he called a family investment group, a seemingly legitimate operation convincing people from our town, friends, neighbors, and family, to pool their money together for property projects out of state. It sounded secure, like small town people helping each other grow. My dad, blinded by brotherly loyalty and the promise of a better future for us, invested everything. Our family's entire savings, including my college fund and the deposit they were saving for a bigger house. And my Aunt Linda was the quiet partner in crime, always smiling, always serving iced tea, always defending Mark's grand plans with a gentle, reassuring voice. Inciting incident, discovery, and initial betrayal. When I turned 16, a quiet alarm bell started ringing in my head. Little things started to feel deeply, profoundly off. Uncle Mark would get visibly furious when someone mentioned returns or asked for an update on their investment timeline. He'd loudly joke about slow markets, but his eyes would be sharp, cold, and calculating. Then, one fateful Sunday evening, I went over to their house to grab a book I'd lent Linda. I froze behind the kitchen door. The door was slightly ajar, and overheard a phone call that didn't just change things. It detonated my understanding of reality. Mark was whispering, his voice low and laced with terrifying panic. "They're asking questions again, Linda. The Thompsons are calling the bank. You have to delete those messages and emails. Do you hear me?" Her voice, usually so steady and sweet, was shaking. "I already did, Mark." I told them the paperwork got accidentally lost in the flood. I told them we're fixing it. I stood there, utterly paralyzed with shock. Paperwork? Messages? Lost in a flood that never happened? It clicked into a terrifying, undeniable picture. He was scamming people, and Linda knew it. That night, my stomach churning with terror and a burgeoning sense of anger, I told my dad exactly what I heard. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. He laughed it off, a forced, uncomfortable sound. He said, with a strained tone of absolute conviction, "Don't talk nonsense, Emma. Mark's my brother. He's been good to us. He'd never hurt his own family." That blind loyalty was heartbreaking. But 2 months later, the truth was unavoidable. Our entire investment, my dad's life savings, had vanished. When my dad finally confronted him, Uncle Mark just gave that familiar, charming shrug. "It was a bad deal, brother. The property market collapsed. I'll make it right. Trust me." He never did. Rising family fracture and sadness. When my parents, terrified and financially ruined, confronted Mark again, my Aunt Linda stepped in, performing the role of the dutiful, distressed wife perfectly. Fake tears, trembling hands, and all. "Mark didn't mean for this to happen," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "He's trying his best to fix things. We're losing money too." But deep down, amidst the performance, I saw it, a fleeting flicker of pure guilt in her eyes. She knew. She was covering for him. She was an active, willing participant in the destruction of her own brother-in-law's future. After that, our family was violently split in two. Half the relatives, blinded by Mark's charm or their own sunk investments, sided with Uncle Mark, clinging to the hope that he'd somehow fix it. The rest stayed silent out of shame, fear, or disbelief. My family moved 3 states away after my dad had a nervous breakdown. He never recovered from losing that money. Our college fund, the deposit for our future, all gone. It wasn't just the money. It was the trust, the betrayal by his own blood. It left a profound sadness over our lives. And Linda, she had the audacity to send Christmas cards every year to our new address, wishing you peace and healing. She'd write in her elegant script, as if she wasn't a willing participant in the theft that robbed us of both. I kept those cards. They were fuel. 10 years passed. I was 27 and living in Austin, working as a journalist. Irony, right? My beat, writing about corruption, white-collar crimes, and financial fraud. Maybe it was my way of waging a cold, slow war against the ghost of Mark Bennett, my way of making sense of the injustice that derailed my father's life. I was good at my job, precise and relentless in my pursuit of the truth. One rainy afternoon, I received a call from an anonymous tip line I managed for my publication. The caller spoke about a small-town investment consultant running a persistent, classic pyramid scheme targeting vulnerable elderly people and religious groups. The name on the digital file the tipster sent made my blood go stone cold. Mark Bennett. He hadn't changed. He just moved on to new, easier marks. My pulse hammered against my ribs, but the real shock came from the second line of the file. Guess who was listed as the official witness on the new client contracts, handling the administrative details? Linda Bennett, my aunt. She wasn't just passively covering up a decade ago. She was still right there in the thick of it, actively enabling his second round of destruction. This was no mistake. This was a lifetime pattern. The confrontation and the second twist. I didn't tell a soul, not yet. I requested an assignment to write a feature story on the new face of rural investment scams and drove back down to my old town under the professional pretense of doing research. When I saw them, it was unnervingly familiar. Mark still loud, still overly confident, still the center of attention at the local diner. Linda was there too, still the quiet, smiling wife, pretending to be innocent. She hugged me tight, the scent of cheap perfume filling my nostrils. Emma, it's been so long. How's your dad? We worry about him. I wanted to scream the decade of anger and sadness at her, but I forced my lips into a polite, professional smile. He's fine, Linda. I'm actually in town writing a feature story about small-town investment fraud. It's a huge problem. Her face, usually so composed, went instantly sickly pale. Her smile vanished. For the first time in my life, she looked truly, deeply afraid of me. Later that night, she called my burner phone. Her voice trembled, a terrified whisper. Emma, please, don't write about Mark. He's changed. We've all made mistakes, haven't we? Think about your father. I said nothing, just listened to her frantic pleadings. Because right then, I realized the ultimate truth. She wasn't protecting him. She was protecting herself and their shared lifestyle. She was terrified, not of his downfall, but of losing the money and the comfort his criminality provided. A week later, the real proof landed on my digital doorstep. Leaked bank statements from one of Mark's disgruntled ex-clients. The transfers were damning. Money wasn't just being shuffled into Mark's primary account. Substantial sums were being funneled directly into Linda's personal savings account. Tens of thousands. While she played the role of the dutiful, unknowing wife, she was actively pocketing her share of the stolen money. And suddenly, every questionable thing from my childhood made terrifying, painful sense. The new diamond jewelry, the gifted luxury car she drove, the extravagant family vacations she claimed were sponsored by the church's leadership. It was all funded by the stolen savings of neighbors, friends, and my own father. It was systematic, shared greed. The lie was not just Mark's, it was theirs. And I finally had the hard evidence to prove it. That night, I stayed up writing. Not a journalistic story, not yet. A meticulous, coldly factual report with every transaction, every deceitful message, and every signed client document attached. I didn't send the report to my editor. I didn't want the credit. I wanted the final, absolute justice. I wanted the law to do what my father couldn't. I sent the entire, meticulously organized dossier to the district attorney's office, anonymously, of course, from a secure, untraceable account. The package was too detailed, too compelling, and too damning to ignore. A month later, the local news broke the story like a thunderclap. Local couple charged in $2.3 million investment fraud. Their mugshots hit every local channel, every Facebook feed. I watched it in the quiet solitude of my Austin apartment. There was no wild joy, no loud celebration, just a profound, cold sense of satisfaction and finality. Justice, slow and brutal, had finally arrived. Mark was immediately remanded, his charm dissolving instantly behind bars. But then came the part that confirmed my deep-seated cynicism. Linda tried to plead ignorance, playing the victim one last time. She claimed through her lawyer that she didn't know the full extent of Mark's activities, painting herself as the innocent, abused wife coerced into signing papers. But the investigators, armed with the evidence I provided, kept digging. They found her personal emails where she gleefully bragged to a distant relative about keeping the old investors quiet and celebrating the untraceable bonus money. She had actively managed the lie. Her performance was over. She received a plea deal, but she was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison for conspiracy and fraud. When my dad, still frail and emotionally scarred, saw the news report on the local Austin channel, he didn't cheer or express anger. He simply cried, a quiet, broken sound I hadn't heard in years. He didn't ask how it happened, didn't question the suddenness of the charges. He just whispered, his voice catching, "Thank you, Emma, thank you." I never told him it was me who exposed them. It wasn't his burden to bear, and the truth in this case was more important than the credit. But when I visited his grave, he passed away a year later, his health never fully recovering from the trauma, I left a small handwritten note tucked under a stone. It said, "They paid Dad." Finally, 3 years after the arrests, I received a letter in the mail from my old address, forwarded through an anonymous service. It was from Linda. She's out now. The handwriting was still elegant, but the tone was chillingly devoid of remorse for the victims. She wrote, "You could have just let it go, Emma. You didn't have to do that to me. But I guess revenge runs in our blood, doesn't it?" I smiled when I read that line. A quiet, knowing smile. Because maybe she's right. Maybe a relentless need for correction runs in our blood. But the difference is, she used her impulse for theft and destruction. I used mine for justice. I used my anger to restore balance, even if it cost me the last illusion of my childhood family. So when you see injustice that ruins your loved ones, is it your duty to choose silence for the sake of family? Or is it your moral imperative to use every weapon you have to enforce the truth, even if it means burying the person you once called aunt?